real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. So welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Nathan Romas, and this is the final episode in the series on service as we come up to Remembrance Day. These are a number of podcasts with current police or law enforcement partners who have served in the military, and we got a bit of a focus on service, what it means and why it's important, in addition to talking with the guests about their experiences in training and deployments, the memories, the people, and some of the impacts of service. So today, we are fortunate to have retired Captain Keith Cunningham on the program. He is the current COO and Chief Instructor for Milcon Training Center out of Ontario, Canada. Keith is a career military officer with a combined time of over 25 years of service with the Canadian Forces and U.S. Army. He completed a combat tour in Vietnam, peacekeeping and counter-sniper operations in Cyprus, as well as several unit and command level military exercises from North America to Europe. Keith has taught marksmanship courses at the Canadian Forces Infantry School and for several police services in Ontario. And he is also a gunsmith with over 30 years of experience. He's a member of the Canadian Forces Sports Hall of Fame and the Dominion of Canada Hall of Fame. And he's done a number of guest lectures and speaking engagements, as well as leading seminars and courses for police, military, and civilians. So welcome, Keith.
Well, thanks very much. It's good to be here. It's good to talk about these things.
Yeah, and you know what? We've had a couple really good guests on, and they've talked about some very interesting things. You're going to be the first one that I think has any experience in Vietnam and Cyprus. So, and I didn't even plan it that way, but it just happened. Everybody we've had on has kind of touched on a different part of the world. So it'll be very interesting to get into. And, we thank you for everything you have done and continue to do in support of police and our country.
Thanks very much. I just can't imagine having done anything else.
Yeah, well, you got some interesting background here. And I mean, the bio I read, that's not even maybe 50% of what you had on there. You've got quite the accolades to your name, and you've been a lot of places. So maybe we'll start kind of at the beginning. And can you tell us where you're from and what led you to the military?
Well, I grew up on a farm on the Bruce Peninsula, and I was raised by my grandparents, so I didn't have any sisters or brothers, and so I had to kind of spend the time figuring out how to entertain myself. And as time progressed along, I began to notice that there was a picture on the wall of my grandmother's brother, my great uncle, George Rogers, who was in a World War I military uniform, and he was killed in the battle at Ypres. And looked at this picture a lot, and thought I started to feel his spirit. And one day the picture kind of spoke to me and said, "I'll take care of you." And from about that point on, now again, I was having to entertain myself, and so I had an imaginary friend whose name was Sarge, and he and I won battles nearly every day that we'd be out and about playing. And of course, he lasted until I went to school. And back in those days, you didn't start school until you were 6 years old. And of course, he started to fade after I had school friends and whatnot. And then just before I was 10 or so, my grandparents bought me a .22 rifle, and the same kind of rifle that all the neighbor boys were getting and whatnot, an old Cooey, 22. And once I had that, then of course I started to entertain myself by shooting groundhogs and rabbits and any vermin that came in.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of took on the job of kind of protecting the place from the coyotes and wolves and whatnot. Anyways, when I got to high school, of course, the Vietnam War was on at that time, and it was, as they claim, it was one of the first wars that was brought to you each evening in your living room. And I remember Walter Cronkite telling you that's the way it was on this date, and seeing all the footage that came out of there. And of course, my great uncle George was still talking to me through that picture, and I needed to go and see what that was like. And so it was I graduated out of high school in 1968, and then I moved down to the States and lived with my real mother. At the time, I wanted to become a fighter pilot. I was quite interested in flying, but in order to do that, you needed to have a college degree. And so I went to college for a year and was absolutely bored out of my skull. Imagine a more boring time than I spent during that year. And the only thing that saved me for that year was our physics professor was big into the Kennedy assassination, and he was using his physics to prove that Oswald had nothing to do with that assassination, and that other people involved. And I found this incredibly interesting to this day, and still read books on it and whatnot.
I don't imagine that was on the curriculum.
No, if the curriculum got the slightest bit boring, then you just simply had to ask him a question about the Kennedy assassination, and off we'd go.
So if we can kind of go just a little bit back. So you were raised by your grandparents, but your mom was in the U.S. this entire time?
Yeah.
Can you kind of just tell us a bit about her or your family, like why you were up here in Canada?
She's Canadian, and of course, back in those days, to be an unwed mother was considered kind of taboo, and so the idea, she had to go off and make a living, and so the grandparents stepped up and raised me, and did a good job. I'm quite happy with the life I had. In fact, would have much rather that life on the farm than any life that I might have had with her in the city. But we did what we had to do at the time, and it all turned out just fine. So,
and you're kind of it sounds like you're more of an outdoors type person. You're kind of geared toward that, especially growing up on a farm, I would imagine.
Oh, absolutely. You can't beat me hard enough to make me go into the city. Yeah, like I said, I had this 22, and I would roam around whenever I could, all over the property, mainly shooting groundhogs, because we had tons and tons of groundhogs back in those days. And I remember to try to feed that 22, I would go along the roadways and pick up pop bottles. And if I remember, a 50 pack box of whiz bang 22s only cost about 50 cents, and you get 2 cents for a pop bottle. And so I only needed 25 or 30 pop bottles to buy another 50 rounds of ammunition. So I always had lots of ammunition.
Well, did you kind of show any signs of that you wanted to go into the military when you were a kid, or did you just kind of have this to yourself and in your head you're thinking this, but you have the picture there? Did your grandparents kind of push you in that direction or know about it?
No, they my grandmother lost a brother in that war, and she didn't want anything to do with the military or war. And of course, if I grow up with an imaginary playmate named Sarge, you pretty well got to guess where I'm going.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, I'm going to go there. So
So, and how were you in school? Like even in high school and stuff? You said you were bored in college, but was sitting in a class even then kind of a pain for you?
If I could be as polite as possibly, I'm not in the slightest bit scholastically inclined.
Yeah.
I tried my darndest to keep up with my homework at the start of the year, but as soon as hunting season came around, then I'd be behind, and I'd be behind for the rest of the of the school year. It was a struggle. I much enjoyed the PT that we did,
Hmm.
and, and some of the science was like good and fun, and some of the geography was good. I had no inclination for French, although I could speak a little wee bit of it. In fact, learned more when I was training on the Vandu rifle team, because of course they just spoke French, and I was able to understand range commands and what was going on that way. But my Latin teacher came to me one day, and the following we had to take 1 year of Latin, and the following year we could drop it if we wanted to. And she came to me and said, "Do you plan to take Latin next year?" And I said, "No, ma'am." She said, "Okay," and I ended up with 50% or something, 51 or 2, just enough to get me through that. So yeah, we weren't. If they'd have taught us ballistics, I'm sure I would have been much more interested in school.
Well, so when you get to high school, and you were mentioning this, so Vietnam is on TV, and that's one of the first, I guess, wars that was widely broadcast. So as things are happening, or relatively recently, that's one of the first wars that's kind of getting that attention. So what were your thoughts kind of around Vietnam, even at that early age?
I constantly watched them and wondered what that was really like. You'd see them interviewing some soldier, and he's as low as he can possibly get, and he's acting talking like he's scared, and I'm wondering, what is that really like, and could I survive it? Could I be a soldier? As good as my great uncle George, could I survive it? I think was perhaps the whole thing. I wanted to experience it. I didn't have a death wish. I wanted to survive it, but I wanted to know what that felt like. What did it feel like to be shot at? What did it feel like to save your own life? What did it feel like to have buddies that you would be willing to give your life for if that's what was necessary? Just all the things that you see in the movies and you read in the books.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think probably as a young man, you want to test yourself, right? And some of that stuff is the ultimate test, especially when your life's on the line. But around 18 through early 20s, I think that's when most people probably take all the risks they're gonna take, and some learn from it, some don't come through it, unfortunately. But that's definitely you're speaking the same language I would be at that age.
Yeah, and some of the training was far harder than the actual combat was. I went through the jump school in the American Army as well as in the Canadian Army, and I did the Ranger course down in the American Army, and I often commented that in Vietnam, when we're out sneaking and peeking, and we would go to ground, put in our night defensive position, and go to ground as soon as it got dark.
Mm-hmm.
And we would bridge out of that thing until the next morning when it got daylight again. And on the Ranger School, if we got 1 hour sleep a day, we were doing really, really well. Well, I got more sleep out on patrols than I even did back in the rear, because there was things to do back in the rear.
Mm-hmm.
And out in the bush, as soon as it got dark, then you went to ground, and you just stayed there quiet, listening to the radio and sleeping.
So you said you moved to the U.S. and now you're with your mom. So can you kind of walk us through what leads you up to even the application process and what that kind of looked like?
Well, as I mentioned, when I moved down there, I didn't give up my Canadian citizenship. I was still a Canadian, but in order to work down there, I had to get a green card. And in order to get that green card, I had to volunteer for the draft. I had to enlist or register for the draft. And so as long as I was going to that college, I was not subjected to the draft at all. But as soon as I dropped out, within 30 days, I got a letter in the mail that said, report to your nearest draft board for your pre-induction medical. And so I went, got on a bus with a whole bunch of other guys. We met up with about, 2,000 or so guys at a great big warehouse in Detroit.
Wow.
We followed these yellow lines around on the floor, and we pissed in a cup here. We coughed over there. They just put us all through that. And of course, we were all very nervous, and so the place smelt of nervous sweat the whole time. Put us on a bus at the end of the day and took us back home. Well, just a few weeks later, I got another letter that said, report to your local draft board for your induction into the United States Armed Forces. And so we ended up being drafted. And at the time, I thought that was the right thing to go, because your minimum enlistment was 3 years, but you could be drafted for 2. And I thought, well, if I like it, I'll re-enlist. I'll re-up. And if I don't, then I've got to spend 2 years in the Army. So that's kind of how we got in there.
And so when you're going through what, I know lots of people see, I would say, what's in the movies, but was the overall, would you say the majority of people were against Vietnam, or were a lot of people there that wanted to be there, and maybe there was more of the public that was kind of on, I'll say, on the side of the soldiers, not protesting the whole thing?
Well, the people I went through training with, once I got through basic and advanced individual training, then I went to the NCO school. And those that were at the NCO school were pretty much there because they wanted to be there. And they knew that they were Vietnam bound at some time or another, but were there because they wanted to be. And of course, then I went to the American Jump School, and those people were all there. They wanted to be there because nobody went through jump school that didn't want to.
Yeah.
They were quickly out. And then, of course, I went to the Ranger School. And, of course, now you've got people who are career-minded that are getting their box ticked for that course. And definitely are Vietnam bound now, for sure. And so those people were the ones that were going as part of their career and wanted to be there. When we got to Vietnam, there was we called ourselves the Dirty Dozen. There was 13 of us that had gone through all of this stuff together. And when we arrived there, we had heard so much about the fragging incidences and how a lot of junior leaders, who are the ones in the field that's actually, having to do the actual leading, how they oftentimes got fragged, and there was lots of people who that just didn't want to be there and weren't about to be led by this person, and if it meant killing them in the next firefight, then so be it.
Wow. And
so we ourselves, we don't want to go with those groups. We want to go with people who we can trust. And so once we got there, then we got on with the LRPs, the Long Range Reconnaissance Patrol people, and did their course, and then I was with them for most of the time, and they were good, solid people. You could trust them no matter what. And but they eventually stood them down, and I ended up going to a reconnaissance platoon, Echo Company Reconnaissance, 2nd of the 1st 196, and I continued to do the exact same job. Only now I'm remember that imaginary friend I had named Sarge?
Yeah.
Well, now I am one, and I'm leading this team, and and so continued to do long range reconnaissance patrols. We were out for 30 days one time, and that sort of stuff.
So one thing I want to kind of see what your family thinks of all this. So when you get into the draft, and at what point do you tell mom and then the grandparents, and what do they kind of say?
Well, of course, my mother was following this all the way through. She knew right from the get go that I was going to go, and her whole attitude was, I'm almost an adult now. If he really wants to do it, what can I do to keep him from doing that? So she sort of accepted it, and grandparents weren't happy with it at all. But again, what could they do?
Yeah,
this was my, and I was out of their influence, and I was going.
So you get your letter, says you're going. What is it, or what takes place after that?
Well, of course, you as you're being processed through, they're asking you what would you like to do. They want to know your aptitudes and all this sort of stuff, your background and that sort of thing. And I said, well, I'm really from a farming background where I did lots of hunting, and I like shooting guns, and you could just see them smile on the other side. Oh, have we got a job for you? And so I ended up in the infantry, much to no one's surprise. But while I was there, I was still interested in flying, and of course they had the warrant officer flight training to train helicopter pilots, and I thought, well, that might be kind of fun. I'm still interested in flying, so I did all the testing, and eventually was told that when I was going through AIT down in Fort Polk, Louisiana, they came to me and said, "You're eligible for the NCO school. Would you like to do that?" And I said, "Well, I've got this warrant officer flight thing. I don't give a damn about that. Do you want this or not?" And I hadn't got the back about the warrant officer flight thing, so I thought, bird in the hand, I better do this. And so I volunteered for that. And I went over to the flight recruiters and told them that, and they said, "Oh, we'll forward this on to you. We've done this lots of times. Once the results are in, no problem." So about 3 weeks into the NCO school, I get this great big envelope, and it says inside, it says, "Congratulations, you have been successfully selected for warrant officer flight training, and you go to," I think it was Fort Hood, Texas, or something like that. So I go running down to my company commander, and I knock on the door, and he says, "Come in." And he was a short, cocky West Pointer from somewhere deep down in the South. And he says, "Come on in here, boy. What can I do for you?" And I've got this paperwork here that says that I can go off and learn how to fly helicopters, and I want to do that. "Is that right, boy? Because I got some training to do for you. Because when you all signed up for this here NCO school, you signed up for some OJT." "OJT, sir?" "Yeah, boy, you ain't catching what I'm a-throwing, are you? That's on-the-job training. Boy, your ass is Vietnam bound, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Is there anything else, boy?" I said, "No, sir." Well, so there I was. I'm thinking, well, they want a ground pounder. That's what I'm going to give them, the best ground pounder as they could possibly have. And so we went in that direction. Well, sometime later on, we were doing some kind of a familiarization with the various areas that we could go in. And we walked into the auditorium, and there's a stage there that's about 6 feet high. And standing on top of that stage with a black beret on, at a cocky, "I dare you to knock this off my head" attitude, with starched combat fatigues, and just looking every bit the Sergeant Rock that you can imagine, stood this Ranger. And what he was trying to do was get people that would be interested in going to Ranger school once they completed the NCO training. And so there was 3 of us or 13 of us that volunteered for that. And that's how we ended up with the Rangers and doing the Ranger course and where we ended up.
I was going to ask, what's in the NCO school? What do you do there exactly?
You learn how to lead at a junior leaders level.
Are you still doing all the basic training at that point, or?
Oh no. You now know how to salute and march and shoot a gun. And so what they're focusing on is you leading a section. I think there was even some platoon size stuff in some sort of exercise or activity.
Okay. So you get this opportunity to go to Ranger school, and where does that kind of take you?
Well, now you get to use that all the skills that you've learned up to that point. You now get to use all of these with people that you're not familiar with, because there'd be, I don't know, 700 or so of us going through this school at a time, and you would be required to, when it's your turn, you'd be required to lead a section or lead a platoon on whatever exercise mission that was designated. And if you did a good job on your first one, you probably wouldn't get another one. If you did a poor job, then they would run you through it 2 or 3 more times until they decided that you were worth keeping or it was time to fail you. But it was very demanding because that's what they wanted to see. They wanted to run you down. They wanted to give you lots of time without sleep and on the go for just steadily to see what you're made out of. And there was a 12-day exercise near the end that we figured we got 10 hours sleep on the whole 12 days. We were fed one ration a day, about 3,000 calories, and we're burning probably 6,000 to 12,000 calories a day because you were just on the go steadily, and you carried rucksacks and that sort of thing.
So I'm guessing you lost any weight you had?
Oh yeah. The chubbier ones that came in, they would lose 20 to 30 pounds. I think I ended up losing 10 or 12 or 15 or something like that. But we were incredibly a lot leaner at the end of that than we were.
And how long is the Ranger school?
It's 8 weeks. It actually, I was going to say it feels like a whole lot longer than that, but because you're on the go so steadily, it actually felt, the time went by fairly quickly.
So what kind of exercises did they have you doing in these schools?
Well, there was they ran you through sort of conventional warfare, and then they ran you through jungle warfare, and then they ran you through mountain warfare, and so you were kind of doing all of the types of activities that the Rangers were specializing in all of those environments.
So you're kind of a generalist, like a specialized generalist, maybe?
Yeah, and of course they were teaching us how to call in artillery and tanks and how to make use of all the support arms. We were expected to, no matter the situation we were in, we were expected, if we needed to have that support, then we were expected to be able to know how to call all that stuff in. And of course, that came in handy very, very much in Vietnam because I was a buck sergeant then, leading a reconnaissance team, and so we needed to be able to call on the support arms anytime we needed them.
Mm-hmm. So what happens after Ranger school?
After Ranger school, we had a month's leave, and then we all reported back to Fort Dix, New Jersey, where we spent about a week or so waiting for our aircraft or our flight to Vietnam. And of course, we were these brand new sergeants just off the Ranger course, and we're Vietnam bound. And as in all armies, they wanted to keep us busy, and so us NCOs would be given a group of privates, and we had to go off someplace and rake leaves or something like that. We'd supervise them raking leaves. Well, we very quickly got tired of this, and we're thinking, well, what if we don't do this? What are they going to do? Send us to Vietnam? And so we would all agree, us 13 NCOs, we'd all agree, okay, let's meet at the base theater for the 10 o'clock movie. Yeah, okay. And so we would dismiss the privates, and we'd say, okay, you guys stay low, don't be seen walking around, and we'll see you tomorrow morning, type of thing. And so we'd go up and do that. Well, this drove the permanent staff there just absolutely crazy, because of course they were losing control of all of these people that they were supposed to be in control of. And so one day, about a week after, the NCO got up in front of us all, and we had to have a morning parade every morning because they would list off those that are about to leave for Vietnam. Their flight was ready for Vietnam. And so one morning, he gets in front of us and he says, "I've got the very best news I've ever had in my entire life. The following people are Vietnam bound." And he listed us 13 off specifically. And he says at the end, he says, "And I hope you all die." Oh, okay. We were sort of hoping that his predictions wouldn't come true, but we were on an airplane shortly after that heading for Vietnam.
So you're hoping for something a little more inspirational, maybe? Not just that.
Yeah, a bit. Yeah.
So what year is this that you're going over?
I went in 71. I think it was March of 7. No, it was June. It was summertime of 71, and I came back in March of 72.
Okay. So you're there in almost a year.
Yeah. Well, as soon as you stepped off the plane, your DROS date return overseas date, was 1 year from that moment. And while I was there, they were starting to de-escalate. The Americans were trying to get out of Vietnam. And so they cut 30 days off of your DROS date. And then I was only there a few months when that happened. And then I was just there a few more months when they cut another 30 days off and another 30 days. And by the time I was there about 8 months, then my DROS date was up.
Can you kind of tell us, like, what's it like when you get there and then being in Vietnam?
Well, it's interesting. We were being driven from the airfield to our quarters in a bus, a great big green school bus looking thing, and it had chicken wire over the windows. Because apparently in the past, Viet Cong would throw hand grenades through the windows because everybody had the windows open, right? Because it was so hot there. And I suppose if I backed up just a little bit more, when I stepped off the airplane, as I was getting close to the door, I could see this bright light coming in, and I'm wondering what that was. And when I hit the door, the heat was so thick, it was like you had to push yourself through it. And it was a struggle. And you wonder, how in hell can I last this long in this kind of heat?
Mm-hmm.
And then the thing that hit you was the smell of human shit being burned with diesel fuel. So you had that diesel fuel and crap smell, and you're one, because that's how they dealt with the waste, human waste over there. Is you crapped into a 45-gallon drum that was cut in half, and every day somebody had to do a shit detail, and that's where it got its name. And you had to drum out, mix it with diesel fuel, and light it on fire, and then you had to keep prodding it to keep it burning until it all was to ashes, and then you could stuff the drum back in underneath the seats in the outhouse.
Wow!
And so that's how I remember arriving in Vietnam. Was that heat and that smell. So once we got our gear, then we got on this bus, and it had these chicken wire over the windows to keep grenades from coming in, and it gave you a bit of a rude awakening. This is not an exercise anymore. People have died because they didn't have that chicken wire over the windows, and so we started thinking that we want to get with the professional people. We don't want to go with what we call line doggies, the regular infantry. We wanted to go with that, and so we started making a big noise about we want to go with the LRPs. And finally, a sergeant and a captain came down to talk to us, and we're all excited because we're getting to go where we might want to go, and they said, well, you're going to have to do a course. Now we're just off of that 8-week course. Remember, 10 hours over 12 days. one ration a day. We're just off of this course, and we're thinking we don't need another course. And finally, I said, "So how long is this course?" And then they said, "Well, it's 3 weeks." 3 weeks? Oh hell, that's nothing. Oh, wait a minute. How much sleep do we get? And they looked at me funny because they hadn't done the ranger course. And they said, "Well, 6 hours a night easily." What? You mean 6 hours a night? Oh, come on. Oh, wait a minute. How much food do we get? And he said, and now he's really looking weird at it. He says, 3 meals a day. 3 meals a day? Point us at this course. Let's go. And so we got on that course, the whole bunch of us. And I ended up the top candidate at the end of it, and got a really nice letter from the commandant.
Oh, wow. So, well, where are you? Like when you land and then take this bus, where do you go?
Well, the airfield there is at Benoit, and they took us to Chulai, is where we did the course. And myself and several others ended up going on up to, they separated some of us out there. They needed people all over. And a small group of us ended up going up to Da Nang.
Mm-hmm.
And we joined the various alert teams that were there. Myself and two others were put on Ranger Team Miami. And there was Frankfurt, there was Moscow, there was several other teams. They all were given names like that, and that the guys all went to.
Who, when you're going out there, and I guess throughout all your training, do you have any people that you're kind of with throughout all of that? Any good friends?
Oh, absolutely. And of course, we stayed in touch with the other teams as well, because they were all right there with us. But they would go out to different objectives and whatnot. But speaking of that, just about 4 weeks ago, middle of September, 5 weeks, I guess now, I was down in Niagara at a U.S. Army Ranger reunion. And those of us that were actually Ranger qualified on these teams were there. So I met folks that I had patrolled with 50 years ago. I couldn't believe it was 50 years. And we could still recognize each other, although at least they changed. I'm pretty sure I didn't.
Well, that's quite interesting how you can still recognize someone from that long ago, especially, well, back then, I imagine with the little amount of food you were eating and then coming off that course, you guys are probably looked a little different, I'd imagine. But so you go out to Da Nang and you join this Ranger Team Miami. What happens after that point?
Well, we went on a variety of patrols. Some of them would last, maybe 6 hours. Others would last, nearly 30 days. So it just depended on the area that you were going to go into, and what you had to do there would depend on the length. So you just prep for that. You go out and do a visual recon, and with helicopters, and then you meet your helicopters at the pickup point. They pick you up and they insert you, and then you spend several days just sneaking and peeking through the bush until it was time to come out, and then you get picked up and brought out again.
So is your main function while you're there, is it to gather intelligence? Would that be like the first and foremost? Or is it to go look for bad guys?
We were in such small teams that we couldn't hold off. They figured we could hold off a platoon-sized element for about 45 minutes. And so we weren't there looking for a fight. We were there looking for it and avoid a fight as much as we could. Now, there were teams there that got wiped out, that they hit a bigger force, and that they simply got overwhelmed. And they were wiped out before they could get artillery or gunships in there to help them. Their radio went dead, and they were never heard of again.
Wow. And when you were there, were you leading this Ranger Team Miami, or do you have a specific function within the team?
I was there, as they referred to me as the chief scout. So I walked point a lot, that sort of stuff. And I was also sniper qualified. So I often carried my sniper rifle with me and would do, if there was a long range shot that we could afford to take, then we would do that. I didn't lead a team until they stood the Rangers down, and I went to Echo Company and reconnaissance, and ended up doing the exact same job. Just a small team that we would sneak and peek around and try to find the bad guys.
During any of these sneak and peeks, did you get into any firefights with anyone, or were you guys pretty well? Like, did you come out almost untouched, nobody injured?
No, there was folks injured. Firefights were kind of nothing so much quite like that you see on TV. And there were sometimes there would be just a shot or two in the dark, and the times they were incredibly hairy. And we'd call in gunships and try to break contact as quickly as we could. We weren't there for a long fight, and we needed to escape and evade to stay alive.
Can you tell me what's day-to-day life like when you're there?
Well, when you're in the rear area, they would give you several days off, and you could sleep in. We lived in what we called hooches. They were made of plywood and 2x4s. They had screening just below at the top of the wall, and screening at the bottom of the wall to try to keep air moving through there. We would buy fans and stuff, and it was fairly comfortable. We had a half decent bed there. We would hire Vietnamese, we call them hooch maids, and they would come in every day, and they would clean the place up, do our laundry, and they would do that out on where the fire hoses were. They would just turn on the water there and beat them around, but they were clean, and we appreciated them doing that. They were always sad to see us go. Of course, we were a bit of a paycheck for them. Each team had their own hooch mates, and they paid them, and they were always glad to see us come back, and so it was kind of nice having that when we got home or got back. And so you would get up, and if you were just in off a mission, you'd probably just spend that day just trying to catch up on sleep and trying to get relaxed. And then you might go to a movie down at the USO club. You'd maybe go to a movie or just go for a walk, or whatever you and your buddies feel like doing. And then you'd be that way for a couple of days, and then you would be then required to do some kind of rear, sergeant major type stuff. I remember having to go off and fill sandbags down at the beach, trying to the South China Sea, down there on the beach, sandbags and whatnot, and other tasks. That evening, you might be tasked to be duty NCO or something like that in the headquarters shed, and that would go on for maybe another 2 or 3 days, and then you'd get a mission. And so you'd have a couple of days to start prepping for that, making sure that all your kit is sorted out, depending on what weapon you're going to be carrying that time, making sure that you had the right stuff in your rucksack, and we'd be scheduled to be at the helipad at a certain hour, and we'd go down. We'd be there, and a chopper would come in and pick us up and take us out. Leading up to that, of course, the patrol commander, the leader, would he'd get in what we called a loach, a light observation helicopter, and he'd go out and do what we called a VR, a visual recon of where we were going, and he would pick a landing zone and that sort of stuff, a couple of them, so that he could go to an alternate one if he needed one, if what we went into was hot. and he'd make all his plans and he'd brief us on it. And if there was any special stuff that we needed to rehearse, then we'd do that during that time as well. And then at the designated time, we'd be on helicopters heading out to our drop-off point. And everybody would be keen and incredibly alert, because you never knew for sure whether you were going into a hot LZ or not. And I forgot where I was going with this.
Just saying that.
Oh yeah,
the LZ.
And of course, you didn't want the helicopters lingering around very much. So we stood on the skid, holding ourselves in place with the door jamb. And as soon as that thing got to 6 feet from the ground, we would just jump off. And you dash 2 or 3 steps and then go to ground, waiting, listening for any shots that were coming your way or anything like that. The choppers would immediately take off. They weren't in position 6 seconds. Everybody was off and they were gone. And that was good, because now, of course, we can hear things. Everything goes quiet. We sit in place for just a few minutes, just to listen, to see what we might get into, and then the team leader would get our attention, and we'd all head off in a direction. It didn't matter what direction, and then we'd go maybe 200-300 meters, and then we'd go into all around defense, and then that's where he would get his bearings and start figuring out where he needed to go in accordance with the mission. The mission was oftentimes 3 grid squares square, so 9 grid squares, and the whole idea was to try to walk through all of those, patrol through them all, or at least observe some of them, because some of them were wide open and we didn't walk through them, but we could observe what was any activity. And so 3 or 4 days later, maybe 5, we'd be at the other end of this our AO, our area of operation, and he'd have already planned on a pickup point, and so he'd be calling in then that he's going with plan, and we'd be there, and the choppers would come in. There'd be gunships circling around us. We call them snakes, because they were the Cobra gunships,
Mm-hmm.
and they're always a comfort to have on station there, because they could react so quickly. And we'd get on the chopper, we'd fly back in, and sometimes you weren't in there just a couple of days, and they'd have another mission for you, and you're putting your kit back together and going again. And sometimes you might be in there 2 weeks, and a patrol might last 30 days. I remember the 30 days we were in the same clothes for the entire time.
Wow.
When you eventually got to take your clothes off, they'd stand up by themselves. They were so saturated with dirt, because you spent a lot of time, on the ground, especially at night, and sweat. And of course, sometimes it would rain on you, and that was sometimes a relief, the rain.
How many guys were you inserting with when you were landing?
It varied. I think the smallest team we had was 4, and we did go in with what we called a heavy, and that would be 2 of the regular teams linked together. And so you might have about 10, maybe 12 guys in a heavy team.
Still doesn't sound like enough. I still think, where's the other 1,000 people behind us coming? But what you're talking about, like filling in the rucksack and being in there for a number of days, what are you bringing with you, and what kind of equipment do you carry? And then you kind of mentioned the weapon systems. So depending on the mission, I guess the gear would be picked based on that.
Yeah, we figured our rucksack weighed 80 pounds, and if you were tasked to carry the radio, then it was 100 pounds. And I just shake my head at the thoughts of that nowadays. How could you possibly carry that? And then the guys that were in Afghanistan, my God, they all wore body armor on top of all of that sort of stuff. We never wore any body armor at all. Sometimes we carried our helmet with us because somebody higher up wanted us to have that, but we never wore it. And so in that rucksack, let's see, the biggest weight was food and water. I carried a 5-quart bladder in my rucksack as extra water, and then I carried a 1-quart canteen on my belt. And we've gone through that on several times. We'd have to resupply out of the streams and whatnot there, and we put iodine tablets in it and whatnot. I recall refilling a canteen, and I had to push this orange scum back off of the water in order to fill the canteen. I put extra iodine tablets in at that time. We would break down our rations so that we'd minimize the weight and we wouldn't take extra stuff with us. Like, something as small as a plastic spoon, you don't need a new one for every meal. And so we get rid of that sort of stuff. Anything that if there was a food in a can that we didn't like, then we wouldn't take that. And, we just minimize everything we possibly could. We each carried a belt of machine gun ammunition for the pig gunner. Each patrol had at least somebody with an M60 machine gun. I carried 500 rounds of rifle ammunition, and my team leader had a real. He did not like snipers. He thought that was a breakdown in his team's firepower. And the only time that he would let me carry a sniper rifle is if I carried the same amount of ammo, the same amount of 7.62 ammo as everybody else was carrying in 5.56, which was 500 rounds.
Well, 500 rounds is not light for anybody who doesn't know. That alone is heavy. I couldn't imagine packing water and other things on top of that.
And we still have a Claymore mine to fit in there. And sometimes carry two of them that we could daisy chain together with a bit of det cord, and hand grenades. I had on my belt, I carried 19 mini grenades. They're about the size of I don't know, golf ball, maybe a bit bigger than that. They were good because you could carry 19 in that 1 quart bottle or cover. And the bad guys didn't know that they were mini grenades and had an effective kill radius of half of what the real grenade had. All they knew is that this stuff was raining down on them and it was exploding, and some of it hurt. And so we carried lots of mini grenades with us. Went through them a couple of times. Went through that 19 pack there a couple of times because if you're being probed in the dark in your night defensive position, you don't want to fire a shot because the muzzle flash will give you away. But they don't know where the hand grenades come from. So we would throw lots of hand grenades to try to discourage them from trying to find us.
So did you guys ever, and I've never heard anyone talk about this on any podcast I've listened to, but do you ever come across any jungle predators or snakes? Is that a common thing?
Yeah, I've got a couple of stories about that. Just making sure there we go. Just making sure my battery wasn't going to run down here. My first experience with a snake, I happened to be walking point, and we came to a little clearing. Now, a little clearing means there's just no trees there, but the ferns are up to your shoulders. It's tough to walk through these. Point man generally watches the far side of the clearing to see if there's any movement there. Slack man behind you generally watches the ground immediately around you. And as we're moving along, as we're moving forward, I hear over my left shoulder the slack man go, "Damn, look at that!" And so I turned in his direction, which was to my left, to find that he was looking to my right. And when I turned all the way around, here's this python. It was just coil after coil of him all coiled up there with this great big head the size of your hand laying on one of the coils.
Jeez.
And so we took several steps back. Now I was probably a couple of feet from stepping on him, but it was rainy and cold, and I think he was rather, what's the word, lethargic, and wasn't keen to chew on it. But anyways, I said, "Get the LT up here and have a look." And the LT's coming up, and he goes, "Damn it, Canuckier, stop this thing." "Well, damn, shoot that thing," he said. So I flicked the safety off my rifle. I'm going to shoot it. And the slack man says, no, I saw him first. Let me shoot it. So there we are arguing in the middle of the desert or in the middle of the jungle who's going to shoot this snake. So he eventually shot it. And then we took time to take pictures. And I have a picture here of it. There's three of us that are standing one beside the other. And this snake, we set it up on their shoulders. And the start, below the one guy's arm on the one side goes across three sets of broad shoulders and almost to the ground on the other side. It was just a whole lot of snakes. Anyway, that was the first one. The second one, it was a couple of months later again, and we're on this trail into Elephant Valley that we're monitoring. Elephant Valley belonged to the Vietnamese, and so it was a pretty delicate place to be. And we're on the trail looking for signs and whatnot of activity. So as we're moving along, and we're really alert, I think I see movement in a tree, about 50 meters ahead of us, and I pointed that out to the team leader, and he says, "Keep an eye on that." He says, "Sometimes the Americans used to use a bomb that was called a flutter. Maybe it was butterfly bomb. Anyways, it was a big bomb that would airburst, and it would send out a whole bunch of little bomblets. And sometimes these would get inverted as they come through the jungles, and then it wouldn't go off. And so the Viet Cong used to use them. They'd suspend them from a tripwire, so that if you trip the tripwire, then this thing would fall on its striker plate and go off. They did the same thing with mortar rounds as well. So he's saying, watch for that. Maybe that's what that is. And so as we got closer, I began to recognize that it's a snake. And he's got himself up in a tree. The tree grows up with tree branches kind of coming off the tip of it, like high branches.
Yeah.
And as he's watching, he's all curled up in that. And as he watches us, his head following us, and it comes to the branch, and he tucks his head back around so that he can continue to follow us on the other side of the branch. And it's clearly a snake. So I said, "Hey, Sarge, can I shoot the snake?" "No, you can't shoot the snake. We're in enemy territory right here, man. We don't want to fire shots. Sarge, there's shots going off all the time anyways. And this will only be just one shot." And then he says, "One shot?" And I'm thinking, okay, I've got you now. And I said, yeah, just one shot. And so the snake was about 15 feet or so in the air. And I had a real clear shot at its head, and I fired that one shot and blew its head apart. And this thing started to slither down the tree and dangling this headless thing coming down dangling. And I reached in there and I grabbed onto it and started to pull it out and pull it out and pull it out. This thing was a great big long. We think it was a cobra because it had what looked like hood at what was left of its neck there. And I pulled this great big ass cobra out of the trees.
I imagine you get bit by one of those, you're not getting saved.
No. I don't think they can get you out of there fast enough.
I've talked to some of the guys on here about deploying to the Middle East, and then they talk about the camel spiders and the other kinds of things you find crawling around out there, some snakes. So yeah, definitely, I'd be more afraid of that than the actual people coming at me.
Well, yes and no. My point got bit by a spider, and his arm, his hand swole up. It's like you took a medical glove and blew it up.
Mm-hmm.
His hand looked like that. It was absolutely useless. We had to medevac him out. And it took quite a while for that to eventually heal for him, and he got his hand back.
So how did you find, when you're over there, how did you find the management leadership? Was everyone kind of good to deal with, or is it like the first guy you were mentioning, kind of sounds like a movie character where they're just, do as I say and shut up about the rest?
There was some absolutely outstanding people there. Some of the higher ups, I'm not sure. They were there trying to get their ticket punched, I think, more than actually leading it. One of the leaders of it was Ranger Team Moscow. He was a legend. he was so revered. Everybody wanted to be on his team because he had developed a sense, a combat sense. He could predict what the bad guy was going to do. He just developed that sense. He was so revered that I remember never speaking to him, never walking up to him and speaking to him because I never thought I was good enough to talk to him. And he was at the reunion here not long ago, this one that I spoke of earlier. We kind of locked eyes across the room a couple of times, and he wasn't going to come and talk to me. He was going to wait for me to come talk to him. And we were there a day before I finally had the nerve to go up and talk. This is 50 years later that I finally had the nerve to go up and talk to him.
Well, his reputation was pretty good then.
Oh, this man has done everything you can possibly imagine. We were all keen to be on his team. I never was on his team, but one of the guys that were there that I went through the Ranger School with said that one time they were in their night defensive position, and of course there's like 5 of them, so it's a very tiny little perimeter. And this guy says to everybody, "Put your rucksack on and start crawling in that direction. Do it now." And everybody's kind of wondering what's going on, but they put their rucksack on, crawled, and they went about 50, 70 meters, and all of a sudden, where they had been got lit up. The Viet Cong had found them, knew right where they were, and were sneaking in on them, and they fired them up. Had they been there, he said, none of us would have survived had we stayed there. And that was kind of his vision of the future that this guy had. He did many tricks like that where he just anticipated something was going to happen, and yep, it happened just like he thought.
He's got that sixth sense.
That's right. Yeah.
Can you?
Now,
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
My team leader, if I disliked anybody, and I spoke with a couple of the other guys at this last reunion, and we all felt the same. In fact, this legend said the same thing about our team leader. We didn't like him at all. He would fake contacts out in the bush so that he could get out of the bush sooner. He lied on intelligence information. He was just a hound dog. And I wouldn't put it past him. A friend of mine that I was quite close with over there, he and I were talking about this, and there was one time that he faked the contact and wanted us to go along with it, and we went along with it because we weren't real convinced that we were going to get out of it alive if we didn't. That he was just going to shoot us, and that would lend more credence to his story, to his lie. So we went along with it until we got out and left it there.
Wow, that's to be in a position where you think your own teammate or the leader of the team might actually even shoot you too.
Yep.
Some different characters they got going in there. I couldn't imagine that nowadays.
One of our teammates there was a great big dumb dude from down south, and he led him around by the nose. I'm sure had he told this guy to shoot us, this guy would have shot us. He was just that way. He thought that team leader was sat on the right hand of God.
Was this team leader at the reunion? He wasn't.
No, he wasn't. In fact, I asked the question, and nope, nobody had seen him. Apparently, he had come to reunions a couple of times, but nobody had seen him recently.
Can you tell us a bit about what it's like sleeping in the jungle? So you're out on these missions, just kind of the environment, the atmosphere, kind of what you're thinking, or I imagine you can't really do much except just lay there.
That's about it. We would, when it's starting to come on dark, we would go into a defensive position and eat our last meal, eat supper, and put all that stuff away. And then as it got a little bit darker, we would sneak off to another spot, maybe 100 meters away or something, to get away from the smell of the food and go someplace where they maybe couldn't see us. We'd go in all around defense with the radio would sit in the middle. Our feet were almost all touching. And the radio would get passed around. The 2IC of the patrol would designate who's on radio watch and for how long, and then you'd pass the radio with a watch around, and then you'd wake up the next guy, and they would go on radio watch and so on. And you just do that all night long, until morning. Until as soon as it started to break light, then everybody woke up, and you just everybody sat still for for maybe an hour or so while it got light, just to be ready in case they'd found out where you were during the night. And then you'd oftentimes just have breakfast right there because your smell is already there, so there's no point in trying to hide anymore. And so you'd have breakfast there, then pack up your rucksack, and then you'd be on the march, going wherever you're going. And it always took a long time to go where you needed to go because you walked so incredibly slow. You were just alert the whole time, and you'd have every hour or so you'd just simply stop where you were, set your rucksack down, and just sit for a while. We'd call them listening halts, but you're also just taking a bit of a break. It was common. It was oftentimes 90 degrees at 9 o'clock in the morning and 120 by noontime, and so the heat was on you.
I find it interesting how you're saying it. Like it's basically a game of inches. Like you're moving 100 meters, 50 meters, and that's it. So yeah, it would definitely take you quite a while to get anywhere.
Yeah. We used to walk on trails as well, and of course, whenever I mentioned this to anybody in the Canadian Army, they would step back and gasp in disbelief that you'd actually walk on trails. But the alternative was to bust the jungle. The Viet Cong, and particularly the Viet Cong, they knew every trail there was in that jungle. And if you're walking, 50 meters over there, making a new trail, well, number one is you're making a new trail, aren't you? Number two is they can hear you. And number three is they know exactly where you are. You're at the end of this new trail. Mm-hmm. And so it was safer to go into high alert mode and walk along the trails slowly enough that you could, if there was somebody coming the other way, that you could see them before they saw you. That sort of thing. We always had somebody walking drag, as we called it, and they were virtually walking backwards. They'd walk the whole patrol walking backwards to make sure that nobody snuck up on you from behind. And so we'd spend hours like that, just literally days out there just doing that sort of thing. When it come time to go to ground, then you'd go, 90 degrees off of that trail, and you might go, if you're going to try to monitor the trail, you wouldn't go very far at all, but you'd go 100 meters or so off of that trail to put in your night defensive position, far enough away that if anybody used that trail at night, that they wouldn't just bump into you.
Wow, it's pretty amazing, all the things that you have to think of and consider, just from the food to the noise, where you're walking, what you're leaving behind. You definitely got to be on high alert, and for yourself too, right? Just the things you're doing that could get you killed.
Absolutely, and smell. It was amazing how much smell you could telegraph. The Vietnamese tobacco, we used to say, smelled like dried dog shit. It was just horrible smelling stuff, and you could clearly identify it from American tobacco. And so the guys never smoked out on patrol, because you can just, even yet, I still think of that. If I'm out hunting someplace and I smell cigarette smoke, I think back to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. One of the teams moving along the trail suddenly got this whiff of Vietnamese tobacco. And so they stopped and backed off and called in artillery. And there was an ambush there waiting for them. And the only thing that they got out of it alive was the smell of that tobacco. But you could smell the difference between the Vietnamese and the Americans simply because of diet and whatever else, body odor, that sort of stuff. You could smell the difference between the two of them.
Really? So when you're there, and I don't know how much of the stuff you keep into now, whether it's podcasts or reading the books, but I think everything you see nowadays is about SOG. So do you guys have maybe a healthy rivalry with them, or is it kind of the same, whether you're called one thing or another?
Well, interesting point. We had a major plaster. This is for John. John Plaster came here
Mm-hmm.
a couple of years back. He was a rep for Savage Rifles, and Savage was doing a show and tell here. And I knew that he was with the Green Beret, and I knew a lot of read about the stuff that he did. And he and his group were sneaking and peeking across the border. They weren't supposed to be there, but that's where they were. That's where they were sent, and so they were doing their sneaking and peeking on the other side of the border. When I was there, we weren't allowed to do that anymore, even on the quiet. And so I was doing the sneak and peeking on this side of the border, in the Vietnamese side of the border. So we were doing virtually the same job, and a lot of the same skills. We were all taught the same skills because they were the best ones.
Mm-hmm.
And it was some fun when Major Plaster and I sat down for lunch. We started swapping war stories, and the whole room just went quiet and listened to us talking. But
I've seen his books, and yeah, they were in Cambodia, I believe it was.
Yep.
A bunch of his stuff.
Laos too, I think.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, he would be an amazing person to talk with, and so you guys basically, because you were saying it was wrapping up, and the Americans were trying to pull out of that area. So
yeah,
you just weren't over the border essentially, but same kind of deal for you.
Yeah, it was the same exactly the same sort of stuff. We were trying to keep the enemy at bay far enough out that they were outside of rocket distance for the air base there at Da Nang, because that was where the Americans were going to pull out of. That's where I flew out of as well. And so we were out there sneaking and peeking, doing that sort of thing. And anytime we could see anything, we would call artillery in on it or gunships on it. Try to minimize the any kind of signature that we might give off, and just sneak and peek, stay out of trouble.
Did you make it out of there without any major injuries?
I was wounded on the 25th of February, my daughter's birthday, in 71. And that was my last patrol. In fact, I was already short. That 8 months had expired, and I didn't have to go out on that last patrol. But I've been with these guys for so long that I was going to go out. We were out for about 2 weeks, I think, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And this all happened near the end. I ended up losing one guy, and five of us were wounded. A couple fairly bad, and myself and a couple others virtually nice souvenir wounds that we can talk about.
Can you tell us about that mission at all?
Let's see. This was with Echo Company, second of first. So we had a platoon-size element. There was 2 teams and a headquarters element. I was tasked to take my team up a river and just check it out, both sides, just looking for signs, just sneak and peek along the edge of the river, just looking for activity, tracks and whatnot, and radioing back any hint that we could find. And I was to go up 3 kilometers up it and then come back. And they wanted me to come back the same route in case activity had happened after we'd gone through. So we were probably 400 meters from the headquarters on our way back, and we were on the south side of the river. The river, in places, was fairly narrow. Other places it ran fairly deep. And all of a sudden, I hear firing going on about 400 meters away, which is where our headquarters element would be. And the platoon commander came on the horn and said, "We have enemy on the south side of the river. right across from us. Where are you? And let us know when you're safe, because they didn't know exactly where we were. We could have been on the south side of the river, coming across right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, we're on the side. We're about 400 meters from you. I need about 3 minutes, and I'll be on the north side. And so I got everybody across to the north side. We would then set up as a bit of an ambush or blocking force if anything came down the river from them. And so we're in position, and I'm just figuring out now. I want the guys up onto the higher. The river had kind of like two levels of bank, and we're on the lower level, so we're only about 2 feet from the water. And then right to our back, there was another bank that went up about 10 feet or so. So I sent the point man and the slack man up there just to make sure that we weren't going to walk into something. And while we're waiting for them just to check it out, we noticed that the gunships were now on station, and they were coming. They would come straight at us. They were hosing down the south side of the river. We are now west of them. West of them, and they're coming just straight towards us, but of course firing 400 meters short of us. And we'd always been told on the Ranger School and then everywhere else, don't ever call in gunships to come towards you or away from you, because you want them moving perpendicular to you, because it's easier for them to fire something long or short than it is wide. And so these guys are firing, straight towards us, but 400 short.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the gunship made the first run, I got everybody to just sit quiet. Don't let them see any movement until they do their gun run. And when they sweep out to do the gun run, they'll disappear up through the river channel, through the jungle there, because it was thick jungle on both sides. And as soon as they disappear, then we'll get up on top there where the other two guys are. Well, so that happened, and I got a couple of guys up, and on the next run, the gunnies they didn't disappear. They did such a tight circuit that they stayed in visual the whole time, and they came right back down in. Like it took them maybe 15 seconds to do that circuit, and they were firing again. So I'm trying to decide. I got to do something here. Do we risk the movement, and they might shoot at us? We got to get the guys out of here. And just as I'm saying that, I look back down the patrol, and I'm starting to tell them what to do. And the RTO, who is a relatively new guy, he's looking out past my shoulder, and he says, "You better get down, Canuck." And I look back, and here's three 2.75-inch rockets coming straight at us. They leave a little black trail when they fly, and my immediate thought was water snakes coming through the water. That's exactly what it looked like. Is these three things coming straight at us? I threw myself up against a big rock that just happened to be there just as they landed, and they all landed within the area of this living room that I'm sitting in. I immediately start thinking, I don't feel like I'm hit anywhere. And I look back, and Howie is stumbling. He's losing his balance. He's going down. Buck is already in the water, and he's taking water and splashing it on his face. Who else was there? And then I'm thinking, well, what about the two guys that were up there on the riverbank? And I hollered out their names, and they come tumbling down the side of that. It reminded me back in my days when I was a kid, and we'd go to these sand dunes, and you'd jump off the top of the sand dune and come slithering down. And they're both saying, "We're hit, we're hit, we're hit." And I'm thinking, geez, you can't be hit too bad the way you're coming down. Turned out that Big George Santiago was hit in the fleshy part of the leg, and my 2IC, Pelico Nelson, he was complaining of his back. He said, "My back just hurt so bad." I had a quick look, and I couldn't see any blood or anything. But now I had to deal with these other people, so I figured he's alive and can move. So I sent some people to the other side of the river to act as a blocking force that weren't hit. Two new guys, in fact. And I sent the rest of the guys that could do anything out onto a little island in the middle of the river to start breaking brush, because that was the only place we could get medevac. The doc was working. He checked out Buck, and he was working on Howie. And he looked up at me and he said, "He's gone, Canuck. There's nothing I can do for him. He's gone." And so the guys are now I'm talking on the radio, getting medevac coming in and talking to hire and all that sort of stuff. So just all kinds of things are happening. And then I realized everybody else has gone to the other side. And Howie, who's clearly dead now, is here. And it's him and I and the doc. And the doc is favoring one of his arms. And so I grabbed onto Howie underneath his armpit and started to take him across the river. But that first little bit of river, and it was probably 20 meters wide, it was deep up to your armpit, and the current was moving fairly quickly right there. And we just started, and the doc I was holding it under his armpits, and the doc was holding his legs. But I noticed the doc was only holding his legs with one arm. And suddenly he let him go, and the current just grabbed Howie's legs and just whipped him downstream. And I'm fighting this current, thinking, "There's no way I'm going to let Howie go. There's no way. I got to hang on to him." And so I inched my sidestep across this until I finally got to the other side, and I'm dragging him up into the shallower water, a bit at a time. And I'm just exhausted from fighting that current. And I sat down, and the next thing I noticed, there's a big hand on my shoulder, and it was Big George Santiago. And he says, "We got him now, Canuck. We got him now." And so they dragged him up on the beach, and by that time we had medevac in, and we got him out of there. We put Buck on the same horn. Buck was hit in both legs and the shoulder, I think. And so we got them out on the first medevac. I called for another medevac, and we were going to put George Santiago. He had a nice souvenir wound through the fleshy part of his leg, through the thigh of his leg. He was still walking around and doing things for us. Who was the other one? The doc walked by me, and the doc was holding his arm, and his face was as white as snow. And I said, "Doc, we got to look at you." And he said, No, I got to go check out Jody. And I said, No, it's your turn, Doc. Sit down here. And I looked at his shirt, and it was just like in the movies. There was a little hole in his shirt, and I put both fingers in there and gave it a rip, and there was nothing but pure white ivory bone showing.
Wow.
A piece of snow had got him right in mid his biceps, through the side there of his biceps, and cut this great big furrow right through there, right down to the bone. I grabbed his own first aid dressing and put it on him, and ordered him to sit down. And I went to look at Jody. Jody was complaining about his back, and I said, "Come on, let's have a look." And I pulled up his shirt. I couldn't see anything. There was no blood or anything. But I noticed this indent in his web belt. And I moved his web belt, and there was a heat blister about the size of a dime right over top of his spine. And what had happened is a piece of shrapnel, hot shrapnel, had hit his web belt and didn't penetrate the web belt, but created a heat blister on the other side. He comes to being paralyzed right there. Anyways, we got them all medevac. Jody wouldn't go out because now I was down to the two new guys and myself and Jody. And Jody says, "No, you need me. I'm staying. Now, come on, you get on this damn helicopter." "No, I'm staying." Okay. So he stayed with me in the field, and we got linked up with the higher headquarters, and that was it. That was my last day in the bush.
Well, what an experience! Right at the end of the deployment. We're glad you made it out. That's quite the event to end it all. So when you come out of all of that, you are done your time there. You fly back to the U.S. and then what happens? What do you go into from that? Because you end up doing some time with the Canadian Army as well.
Oh yeah, I spent 25 years with the Canadian Army.
Mm-hmm. So what's the transition, or what happens after you come back to the U.S.?
We came through Fort Lewis, Washington. Fort Lewis, I think it was. And I got my papers. I'm done. Got on an airplane and flew to Detroit. My mother and my stepdad picked me up there, And my stepdad, of course, had been in the Second World War. He was a waist gunner in the Second World War, and he tapped my Purple Heart and said, "You didn't mention this to us, did you?" No, I didn't have time. And so went home. Spent a few months just trying to recruit, and then decided that I wanted to pursue this gunsmithing thing. And so there I had the GI Bill. I was eligible for that. And so I went down to Golden, Colorado, and did a 2-year gunsmithing course down there on the GI Bill.
And what exactly is the GI Bill? Is it just kind of giving you some skills now that you're out?
Yeah, it gives you money to go to university or trade school or anywhere, that they recognize in order to give you a trade, getting to the Army.
Okay.
So I moved back to Michigan, and I gunsmithed for Williams Gun Sight for quite a while. But I still loved my time in the Army, but I wanted to come back to Canada, and so I went up to London, Ontario, and joined the Canadian Army, and moved to Canada. Went to where is it? Out east. The base is closed down now, but it was in Nova Scotia. Did basic training there. Went to Gagetown. Did TQ3 there.
They put you back through basic, even though you already have done quite a bit of stuff.
Yeah. And they knew that, of course. They knew my record, and it was kind of interesting. I was what they call it, the course leader for the whole time in Nova Scotia. And on a Friday, they'd be heading home to for the weekend, and they'd toss me the keys and say, keep everybody safe and tell us what happened Monday morning. And so I was virtually in charge of that platoon for that whole duration.
Oh, wow.
And it worked out really well. We ended up winning. The worst thing that you could do there is every week you had an inspection of your quarters, which of course a lot of people living in them. And so I organized that just like I organized the patrols in Vietnam and assigned tasks and everything. And we were the top platoon for the whole time that we were there because I was there with experience to organize things.
Yeah.
And the guys platoon soon saw all of that happening, and we had benefits because we were the top platoon, recruit platoon, and that sort of stuff. So the same thing happened when I went to Gagetown for TQ3, and I was in charge there as well as the student. I was in charge of them, and that all worked out the same. Then I was tasked to golf company and number 2 platoon as a private soldier, and that's where I met Warrant Officer Cy Clayton. He was our platoon warrant there, and I figure the best leader I had ever experienced. He was just an absolutely outstanding guy. I learned so much from him just by being led by him. Every day I would see something about him and go, oh, there, I want to remember that. I want to remember to do that. That was good. He was just an outstanding individual. And
even coming in with all the experience you had, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. If I had to go to combat with anybody that I ever met in the Canadian Army, he'd be the top of my list.
So what kind of missions did you take on with the Canadians?
Well, you have to remember that my time in the Canadian Army was a peacetime army.
Mm-hmm.
If I thought for a minute that college class that I did down in the States was boring, a peacetime army with combat experience, it's just mind-numbing. And so I got involved with the rifle team as soon as I could. One of the things that I had learned coming out of Vietnam was the fact that you can never be too good a shot. And the thing that I had noticed in the Canadian Army is they weren't taking marksmanship seriously at all. They would go through the steps of it, but they weren't taking it seriously at all. When again, when I was a private soldier there, they'd march us to the range, and they knew that I was a half decent shot at that time and was keen about shooting. And so they'd line us all up and assign us a lane that we were going to shoot on for the PWT, the personal weapons test. And as soon as I shot mine and I'd fall back, I'd be the company sergeant major would come up to me with a handful of ammo, and he says, "I'm shooting on lane such and such. Next relay, here, you shoot for me." And so I'd go up and I'd shoot for the sergeant major, and then the platoon warrant would hand me his ammo, and the platoon commander would hand me his ammo, and I'd end up shooting through the PWT, 3, 4, 5 times for all these higher ups that either didn't know how to shoot or couldn't be bothered learning how to shoot or didn't want to shoot or didn't want to have to clean their rifle at the end of the day and that sort of stuff. And so that was that. I was incredibly turned off by that approach, although I loved the shooting. But I eventually got onto a rifle team, the unit rifle team, and I spent my entire summers, virtually every one of the 25 years except one. I spent the entire summer shooting on rifle teams. I was just a team member, and then when I got some rank, I was team captain, and then got some experience. I was team coach, and so I shot on every one of my own teams, with the challenge that I want to be the worst shot on the team. Catch up, guys.
So, well, I guess that would be kind of one of the downfalls of people having nothing to do. They're not going to keep their skills up.
Well, as we're finding out, marksmanship is a skill that you need to keep on top of, or you'll lose it. And there's lots and lots of people who thought at the time that shooting wasn't important. Artillery, machine guns, anti-tank weapons, all far more important than learning how to shoot your personal weapon.
Mm-hmm.
When I eventually went through officers training, and I was tasked to 1 RCR when they were in London. I was a platoon commander for a short while, and then I became 2 IC of the recce platoon there under Dan O'Connor. And they insisted on us going to coffee break at 10 o'clock. All the officers had to go to coffee break, and it was not a bad thing because you could link up with people there if you had business to do with them. But I would promote and try to push marksmanship, that it's not good enough in the Army, and to any of the senior officers that would listen, particularly the development of the sniper section in recce platoon. Eventually, I pissed the commanding officer off to the point where he looked at me and said, "Shut up. Go write a service paper. Don't talk to me about this again." Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. And of course, I wrote that service paper, and it eventually got published in the infantry journal. But there was no improvement on the marksmanship side of things.
So you're like, even what you do now, you are involved in training people on how to shoot a rifle. Did you develop anything while you were there, or like you came in, you had a sniper experience in Vietnam, and then you come into the Canadian Army, they make you go through all the basic stuff again, but did you go back through like a sniper school, or did you have to kind of re-up on all your qualifications with them? And then did that lead to anything in the future? Because you're saying that they didn't end up taking it seriously. At some point, did they ever listen to what you're saying?
No, they never did. The closest I ever got when I was OC of recce in 2 RCR, I started to deploy the sniper section, and this was one of the few times that snipers actually got deployed on exercises. They were normally sent out as just recce deaths, but I was pushing it, and so during training on the base there, company training, inter-unit training, I would find out where one of the companies was doing a defensive position. I would go get permission from the company commander to deploy snipers against them. And he would look rather nervous and say, "Well, yeah, okay, as long as you don't interfere with our training, yeah, no problem." And very shortly after that, you'd see him in his vehicle heading back to camp because he knew he was going to be one of the prime targets. And so I would send a two-man sniper team out, and they'd have a radio with them. And I would just give them the location of where the defensive position was. They had to find a position. So when they were in position, they would contact me and let me know where they were, so I knew where they were. And then we would just stand around and wait. And pretty soon, you'd hear this blank shot being fired away off in the distance. And then up on the radio would come, that platoon commander that's standing beside you, he's just been engaged.
Mm.
And I would turn to his warrant officer, and I'd say, Warrant, the LT here is in you just got covered in red mist and bone chips. The LT's dead. You need to do something about that. And he would just look at me like a deer caught in the headlights, because they had not ever experienced that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I call on the radio back to them, and I said, okay, what range were you at? Did you have set on your elevation? Yeah, okay. That's what you have on for wind? Yeah, okay. We'll call that a good hit. Eventually, the company 2IC, who's now in charge because the company commander took off on him, he'd come over to me and say, well, how do you deal with it? We've never had to do this before. And I'd say, well, do you have notional artillery here? You're playing with a notional artillery? Yeah. And you got an idea where the sniper came from? Yeah, that section down on that side over there said it came from that tops of trees out there. Okay. I said, then obliterate that grid square.
Yeah.
With artillery. And then as soon as you can, send a platoon, if you got a whole platoon, at least a section down that tree line down there to that top, and see what you find. Well, that's what he ended up doing. And sure enough, a little while later, the platoon comes back, and in tow are my two snipers. The snipers had got out of there when the notional artillery went in, but had came back with such a good position they had to come back. And of course, that's when the patrol nabbed them. So good lessons learned there on both sides.
So when you look back at both the Canadian and the U.S. Army and your experiences there, what do you find are the big differences between the two, and just outside of like funding and all the other things? But when you talk about just maybe the quality of soldier at the time that you were in and leadership, what would be some of the big differences that you noticed?
I think the one big difference is that the American Army had lots of combat experience, and that they had people who were now involved in the training that had that combat experience. The Canadian Army, when I was in the Canadian Army, of course, they didn't have any combat experience at that time, and perhaps have changed somewhat since then. But the Canadian Army shot too many blanks, and therefore they had a whole different attitude about ambushes and attacks and defensive positions and all that sort of stuff, because nobody ever died.
Mm.
And you could shoot all the blanks you want, and nobody ever died. You never killed anybody, and that's kind of an important thing too. You got to have people who can do that, who can actually kill people and not be affected by it to the point where they become useless. So I think that was the biggest difference I noticed between them. Neither side pursued marksmanship all that hard. Not the detailed stuff. Now, snipers, on the other hand, they were heavily involved in the marksmanship, and they were good shots and good people. I really don't know what the Canadian Army's like. I've been out of the Canadian Army now longer than I was in, so I really don't know what they're dealing with right now.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly don't like hearing in the news, about them. What was it? They want to reflect the they want to be a reflection of our society.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think an army can work that way at all. I think an army needs to be an identity all of its own. You need to be thinking like a team. You need to look like a team. You need to be able to trust each other.
Yeah.
And they're going to start letting people, color their hair and wear whatever they want to wear and that sort of stuff. You got too many individuals to make this into a team. It's got to be a team.
Well,
it's got to be a team that people want to be on.
That's very similar to recruiting for a lot of different things, even police. and I've had that discussion with many people on here when we talk about the recruiting, and yeah, I don't know if people necessarily hold the same values nowadays, and kind of realize just how dangerous the world is out there. And kind of like you're saying with this, the Canadian forces, they haven't had a ton of maybe at like that time when you were there, they didn't have a ton of experience in combat. But even now, like I know Afghanistan has happened and we lost lots of people there. But since then, we're usually on training missions and peacekeeping stuff. We kind of lose the edge and the hardness that some people do need to be in these jobs. And if they get put in a position where, they got to defend others or themselves, and I've seen this on the street here, you'll see people get into a fight and basically they just they have no self-preservation. It's very weird. It's almost like it's bred out of people. So, there are real threats out there, whether it's local and you're just walking down the street and something happens to you, or it's from the other side of the world. There's always somebody looking to do harm. I think that's kind of missed in this whole recruiting strategy, that we need some people with an edge to them, certain type of mentality to be in there. And it's not meant to be all, smelling the roses here and walking through the nice fields. So it's meant to be tough and harden you up. So one other question I have for you was, and I'll keep you too much longer, but you've, I guess, twice transitioned from military to civilian life. How do you find that? So, the Americans had the GI Bill and they kind of paid for you to have a trade, but again, you're not in combat and it's a lot slower. And then going from even the Canadian military into civilian life, can you kind of talk about those two transitions?
Yeah, the interesting part about coming out of the American Army, of course, I came straight out of Vietnam. I was home probably within a week of my last patrol, but I noticed right off all the senses, your sense of smell, your sense of hearing, your sense of awareness were all elevated while I was over there. And I remember when I got home thinking that I'm starting to lose that. Oh, I don't want to lose that. I want that elevated. I want to be able to smell the smells I could smell before. I want to be able to recognize. I want to be alert on everything, but I was losing it all. I remember that I would go out rabbit hunting more often than I used to, hoping to maintain those senses. Mm-hmm. But the fact was that I never shot back, and so therefore you didn't need those senses, and eventually lost them. Coming out of the Canadian Army, I was incredibly fortunate at the time. I had already met Linda, and Linda is the capital B in our business. She comes from a business background. She understood how businesses have to be developed. I was interested in teaching marksmanship. We both wanted to have a large property that we could, get lost on and certainly go shoot a shot on anytime we wanted to. And so I fell into that. She developed that. And I fell into that so easily, because here I was doing the exact same thing I'd been doing in the Canadian Army, which was trying to teach marksmanship. Mm-hmm. And now I got but the way I wanted to do it. Now, of course, Linda has tons of experience as well. She and I teamed up on the national sniper competitions and won the pairs there, I don't know, 8 times or something, a bunch of times. We were always the pair to beat because she's a good shot as well. And so she understood how to teach this stuff. And between the two of us, we came up with these programs. And so we just launched right into those. And there I am teaching cops and competition shooters the same thing that I was trying to teach the soldiers on the rifle teams, how to fire a perfect shot. So I transitioned incredibly smoothly in both cases.
Well, that's good to hear. And Linda will be on the show. I think we got her booked for November 9th.
Yeah.
It's on my schedule, but it's coming up in a couple weeks here. So, and definitely looking forward to that. Is there anything else you think we missed? Anything else? Anything else you want to kind of cover or go over?
Thinking. Yeah, Cyprus. Um, yeah, we did. I guess we didn't talk about Cyprus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you want to kind of cover Cyprus?
Well, Cyprus was. I was there in I think '77,
Mm-hmm.
and it was relatively tame uh, in comparison. But there was still always a danger there. I was tasked one time. I was a corporal at the time, and I was tasked to lead a patrol, just a practice patrol. And that particular patrol, the Turks stopped us going through their lines, and one of the Turks held a G3 in my ear for a little while until we could convince them who we were and get his Subai, his officer, over, and everything got explained, and he offered me a cigarette, which was a joke in our battalion because everybody knew how a religiously oriented non-smoker I was, and here I was taking this cigarette from the Turk, and that was simply because I thought that now was not a time for me to possibly offend him by not taking it.
Yeah, he's extending the olive branch, and you're not in the position.
Yeah, exactly right. We did a couple of sniper type roles there on Leisure Palace when the Greeks and Turks were coming in to do their talks. They often did them there at Leisure Palace. So our sniper sections were up on the rooftop there, just monitoring, overlooking everything.
How long were you there?
How long? 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah, it was a better go than because I was in Recce platoon at the time, and it was a much better go than what the line guys were getting. They stayed in one spot, and it was incredibly boring for them. But we patrolled the Green Line, and the patrol would last, maybe 4 hours or something, and then you were off until the next time you had to patrol. And so you'd laze around the swimming pool there at the Leisure Palace, or you'd go work out in the gym. I was bench pressing 400 pounds at the time, and I had arms on me that I had to roll up the sleeve of my shirt, and then put the shirt on because I couldn't get it to roll up over top of my biceps. So we that was pretty cool in that respect.
Say that's it.
We don't have biceps, fortunately.
Say that is that typical of a sniper?
Well, I have C3 rifle weight a lot, so it might have helped out. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they're probably not like the rifles now, where lots of it's made of plastic, and everything's about being lighter.
Well, that's not a bad thing, as long as it produces. The C3s that we had, they let me down more often than not. We shot them in competitions, and they wouldn't always stay zeroed, and it was a mess. I eventually got so tired of shooting them that I just quit, and then I switched over to shooting the sniper matches for the DCRA, Dominion Canada Rifle Association, where I could use my own rifles. Immediately, I won, I think, 8 sniper championships, and they were virtually all with my own rifle. What
was your main function in Cyprus? Is it strictly keeping the peace over there?
Yeah, it was just driving or monitoring each side, so that if they were seen to be starting to escalate something, that you could get word down to the higher ups as quickly as you could. One of the things that we used to do there on these patrols would be to stop at a spot where we could overlook either one side or the other, and we'd pay attention to the number of rows of sandbags in that particular bunker. We'd try to notice how many guys are there, what kind of weapons they have, and who's in charge, and that sort of thing. And then, a few days later, we'd come around on that same patrol. We'd stop in the same place, and we'd compare notes. Is the same number of layers of sandbags? Oh, wait, there's an extra row. They're not supposed to do that. And so now we'd have something to report in that they are improving their positions. So that's kind of what we did. Oftentimes it was I don't know, a bit on the silly side. You'd see a shepherd herding a great big old flock of goats and sheep through a minefield, and we'd get on the horn. What do you want us to do here? Are you going through a minefield? And by the time everybody would get in the know and a decision, we'd say, "Oh, never mind. He's through the minefield now, and nothing happened." So,
Were you teamed up with any other forces, any other countries, or is it just Canada there, or where you were?
in Cyprus.
No, but like, were you with any other militaries while you were there, or was it just like where you were? It was just Canadian forces.
It was just Canadian forces. You'd see some Brits, driving by in some vehicle somewhere. Seems to me there was a Swede, there was some Swiss there. No, Swedes were there as well. I was part of a patrolling competition, and we had our umpire with us was a Swede. And we went up to Decalia one time. I drove a Lynx up there because the British were doing their NCO course on the island, and they wanted to see all the different weapons that the various contingents had. And so we took a Lynx up there. We shot our C5, and I briefed them on the sniper rifle, and somebody else on the FN, that sort of stuff, just so that they kind of had a general knowledge of what we were using. It was a good go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so how would you say all that's kind of prepared you for what you do now? Is that I guess the Army's maybe giving you a lot of the skills that transitioned into civilian life, and then this is what's led you to doing your practice now, and I mean all the awards and accolades and Hall of Fame. They probably set you up pretty good in that direction.
Yeah, and of course Linda took advantage of that and played that, of course, very well. But I think the normal stuff that is taught in the Army, particularly leadership, has played very well. Recognizing the need to be organized, the need to be on time, the need to know your topic, being able to stand in front of people and talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think all of that, of course, came out of the Army.
Yeah, and you know what? I'd say that's probably one of the biggest benefits about going through a paramilitary organization like I have. You've been the actual military, but it's all the things like attention to detail, organization. Public speaking is probably a big one too. Being out there and talking to people that you don't know, and that's probably one of the biggest fears for a lot of people. So,
I still find it a bit uncomfortable to get in front of people to talk about something that I'm not as familiar with as I am about shooting.
Mm-hmm.
I have no problem getting up to anybody and talk to them about the marksmanship principles. But if you were to ask me to get up and talk about the legal side of situational awareness, the legal side of anything, I'm just not familiar with that subject, and I understand the need for that, and therefore I recognize my shortcomings and don't want to do that unless I'm been made familiar with it.
Yeah, no, I mean you definitely know your craft, and that's what you speak to. So, but I think we're kind of at the end of our time here. I don't have any other questions, and I have to get going to work. So, but is there anything else that you would like to just make sure we get out there? And I also want you to make sure you get a time to kind of plug your company and just tell people how they can follow you or take a course.
Well, we're on the web, milken.com. And we do courses here all summer long. We schedule them, of course, and so wanted to take the course, you'd have to meet our schedule. We do private courses as well, whenever there's room available. So if you wanted to do something specific, just one-on-one type of thing, then we can do that. We can pretty much guarantee, no matter what level of a marksman you're at, we can pretty much guarantee that you'll leave here better than when you arrive. and we do promote the mental side of the game. We think it's about 90% of the game, and so we do a lot of that sort of stuff. And I mow the grass. And
yeah, well, you know what, and that's a big thing that Ben Click when he was on here, and we talked to him about, and it's a lot of the mental stuff. You got to focus on that.
Yeah, I remember Ben on our rifle teams, and he grasped that mental side of the game very, very well to his benefit.
Great. Well, we'll kind of end it there. If you can hang on the line for just a second, I'll say bye offline, but I'll say thanks for coming on. We really appreciate the time and everything you've done for everybody in this country.
Thanks very much. I enjoyed myself here with you. It was therapeutical.
Great. Okay, just hang on for a second.